I never thought coffee could taste so bitter. I sat alone in the corner of a quiet cafe, the hum of conversation around me fading into a dull roar. The steam from my cup curled upward, mocking me. Every sip burned, but not as much as the memory of the CEO's cold, smiling dismissal. My hands shook slightly as I lifted the mug. I replayed every detail, her words, the way she gestured, the smirk as she told me to leave. Humiliation clawed at me, mingling with disbelief and a gnawing sense of betrayal. How could someone so new, so inexperienced, hold this much power over me, over my company? I closed my eyes, letting the memory stretch. The office, the staff frozen. In awkward silence, the weight of their eyes' judgment, pity, fear all burned into me. I had spent years here, building, nurturing, keeping secrets that no one could know. And in a single hour it all felt ripped away. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to steady my racing thoughts. My family's company, the one my grandfather had built from scratch. The shares in my name, the legal documents hidden in a safety deposit box, the truth that no one in the office suspected. Not even her. A bitter laugh escaped me. How ironic. How cruel. She thought she was in control. She didn't even know I was the real owner. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past in muted colors. Neon signs flickered as cars passed, their headlights reflecting like tiny accusations. I wondered, was this planned? Did someone manipulate her? Who wanted me out? My mind spun, connecting dots that didn't always exist. Was it jealousy? Greed? Or a deeper betrayal from within the family itself? The barista dropped a cup with a clatter nearby, jolting me back. I forced a smile at the startled look on her face. "I'm fine," I muttered, voice hollow. I pulled out my phone, scrolling aimlessly through emails and messages. Hoping for some clarity? Nothing, just mundane reminders, unread newsletters. And then dash ping. I froze. A message flashed across the screen. "Meet me tonight. I know what really happened." My heart skipped a beat. Questions collided with suspicion. Who was this? How did they know what happened this morning? Could I trust them, or was this another trap? I looked around the cafe, suddenly aware of the quiet observers. People sipping lattes, tapping keyboards, living ordinary lives. None of them knew the storm brewing inside me. None of them understood the weight of the secret I carried. I felt my hands tighten around the coffee cup, knuckles white. The thought of confronting someone who had knowledge, who could give me answers, both terrified and exhilarated me. The possibility of uncovering the truth made my pulse race. Outside, the sky had shifted to a bruised gray, the clouds heavy and low. A drizzle began, tiny droplets pattering against the window, mirroring the chaos inside my chest. I watched them run in rivulets down the glass, wondering how much of my life had been orchestrated without my knowledge. I pressed the phone to my ear, then thought better of it. I didn't want to speak yet. I needed to prepare, to think, to plan. One wrong move could ruin everything. I glanced around the cafe once more. The warmth, the mundane chatter, it all felt like another world. Out there, the city continued, but for me, everything had shifted. My life, my company, my secrets, they were suddenly all part of a dangerous game. I stared at the message again. Heart pounding. Tonight could change everything. Or destroy me. Cliffhanger. A mysterious message pops up on my phone. Meet me tonight. I know what really happened. The night air felt heavier than usual, almost suffocating. I walked into the dimly lit office of the lawyer, heart pounding in ways I hadn't felt since childhood. The room smelled of old leather and polished wood, a library of secrets waiting to be unearthed. The shadows in the corners seemed to whisper, reminding me that some truths had been buried for a long time. He looked up from behind his desk, a man older than memory, yet with eyes that could pierce through lies. "You came?" he said simply, his voice calm but carrying weight. I nodded, unsure if I wanted answers or just a reason to hate myself for being blindsided. I didn't know who else to turn to," I admitted, the words tasting bitter. He gestured for me to sit. Papers were scattered on the desk, legal documents, old photographs, letters yellowed with time. "You remember what I told your grandfather?" he asked, leaning back. I nodded slowly. Memories of whispered conversations in grand hallways, of my father's sharp warnings and my mother's anxious glances, returned like ghosts. He continued, "The company isn't what it seems. Your shares, your ownership, it's all yours. Hidden, secured, protected from those who would take it for themselves." My hands tightened around the armrest. I'd always known there was something more, a safeguard my grandfather had put in place, but hearing it out loud in the quiet of this office sent a shiver down my spine. The betrayal wasn't just from an impersonal CEO, it was rooted in family and ambition and greed that had been simmering for decades. I closed my eyes. Childhood memories came flooding back, the afternoons in the sunlit courtyard, listening to my grandfather's stories about building the company from nothing. The warmth of those days clashed violently with the cold sting of the present. How many family dinners had hidden tensions, hushed schemes, secret rivalries? How many smiles had masked envy and betrayal? "He trusted you to protect this," the lawyer said, his voice breaking the quiet. I swallowed hard. Protect it or reclaim it? The thought sent a surge of resolve through me. I had been passive for too long. I had let appearances, trust, and courtesy blind me. We went through old documents, signatures, shares, contracts. Each page was a reminder that I had been silent too long. Anger mingled with fear. My heart raced with every revelation, each fact a key to a door I hadn't dared to open. My mind whirled, imagining the CEO strutting in the office. Blind to the truth I carried like a weapon in my pocket. He paused, looking at me with steady eyes. "Remember, they think they're in control. They have no idea who really owns this company." His words echoed, heavy like a promise or a warning. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, triumph, rage, and a deep, aching grief. Betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. My own family, the people who were supposed to guide me, had played a dangerous game with my inheritance, leaving me unprepared for the chaos today. And now, the new CEO had stepped into a battlefield she didn't even know existed. I leaned back, thinking about my next move. Every smile she flashed in the office, every confident step she took, it all could be undone with the right strategy. But the stakes were higher than I'd expected. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. It was about justice, about setting things right without losing myself in the process. The lawyer handed me a folder, thick with evidence, letters, and secret contracts. "Study this plan carefully. She doesn't know who really owns this company." Yet, his words settled into me like ice and fire all at once. I felt a spark of something dangerous, a thrill that mingled with my fear. Tonight I realized my life had changed forever. The pieces were on the board. Now it was my move. I left the office with the folder clutched tightly to my chest, the night air wrapping around me like a cloak of secrecy. My mind raced, plotting, imagining, anticipating. The game had begun. And this time I was playing to win. Cliffhanger. The lawyer whispers, "She doesn't know who really owns this company yet." I realized watching her. The CEO wasn't just arrogant, she was dangerous. I started observing her quietly, blending into corners of the office, pretending to check emails, make calls, but really watching. Every gesture, every word she spoke, revealed cracks beneath her polished exterior. She smiled too much, too wide, as if to mask insecurity. She corrected employees with sharp tones, her eyes scanning for weakness, for any sign she could exploit. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. She didn't just take my job, she was shaping the company to her whims, unaware that I held the real power. The thought made my blood boil. I ducked behind a potted plant near the meeting room doorway, listening. "If anyone questions my decisions, they'll regret it," she whispered into her phone, voice low, venomous. She mentioned a name, one I didn't expect. My pulse jumped. Could it be someone I trusted? Someone planted in my life, feeding her lies? I backed away silently, heart racing, mind spinning. How long had she been plotting? How deep did this go? The office I thought I knew was suddenly unfamiliar, full of whispers, half-truths, and schemes. Later, I joined a casual team discussion, pretending to review reports. I watched her approach a colleague. The tension was palpable. "This needs To be done my way, she said, fingers tapping her clipboard. Her tone left no room for argument. My stomach twisted. She believed she was untouchable. Yet she didn't know I held the keys to the kingdom. I caught her glance at me briefly, and I forced a neutral expression. Beneath my calm, a storm raged. I wondered if she could sense that I wasn't as powerless. As she thought in my private office, I leaned against the window, watching her stride past, commanding and confident. The city reflected in the glass, lights flickering like tiny accusations. I thought of my grandfather's warnings. Power attracts those who hunger for more than they can handle. I reflected on my childhood again, on the family betrayals that had shaped me. I remembered my uncle whispering promises to my father that he'd safeguard the company while secretly maneuvering for total control. I remembered late nights spent deciphering letters, contracts, and hidden documents, realizing the threads of deceit had been woven long before this day, and now she had stepped into a battlefield she didn't understand. Every confident smile, every harsh word, she was dancing on a floor that belonged to me without realizing it. I felt a surge of both rage and exhilaration. Later, during a team briefing, I overheard her plotting again. Her voice was lower this time, almost a hiss. I need to remove anyone who questions me, no exceptions. She didn't even suspect I was listening, taking mental notes, planning subtle countermoves. The audacity of her ignorance was intoxicating. I realized I had allies I hadn't considered, employees who admired competence, who silently doubted her decisions. If I played this right, I could shift the tide without revealing myself too soon. Patience would be my weapon, strategy my shield. That evening, as the office emptied, I lingered near the balcony. The sun had dipped, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep golds. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the city below hummed. Unaware of the storm inside the walls of my company, I made a vow. I would expose her arrogance, her manipulations, without giving away my hand. Every move she made, every attempt to assert dominance, would be her undoing. And when the time came, she would never see it coming, but tonight, as she walked past my office door, I caught a shadow of suspicion in her eyes. She's clever, maybe even dangerous. And I realized the game had only just begun. Cliffhanger. I overhear her talking about eliminating obstacles in a phone call, and one name sends chills down my spine. The truth always hides in plain sight. I spent the night in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of old company documents, legal papers, and faded photographs. The city lights filtered through the blinds, casting shadows that danced across the walls, like ghosts of the past demanding attention. I sifted through them, each piece a reminder of promises broken, whispers ignored, and betrayals buried. My grandfather had been meticulous. Every major decision, every share transfer, every contingency plan carefully hidden in places only I could access. And yet, as I pieced it together, I realized how much had been manipulated behind the scenes. Someone had tried to erase me from the company's history. Someone who knew the secrets but pretended otherwise. A photograph fell from the folder, a young me, laughing at a family gathering, my father standing behind me with an uneasy smile. I remembered that night vividly. The laughter, the music, the hidden arguments whispered in hallways. My uncle's shadow looming, subtle threats masked as casual advice. My heart tightened. That was the moment it began, the slow, steady push to strip me of what was mine. I pored over the ledgers and legal contracts. My shares were hidden, yes, but other family members had been maneuvering for decades, siphoning influence, twisting documents, fabricating authority. I felt a pang of rage and sorrow. How blind I had been, trusting smiles that hid knives. I thought about the new CEO again, and a plan began to form in my mind. She was arrogant, careless, and unaware of the web that tied my family to this company. If I played my cards carefully, I could reclaim control, but first, I needed to understand every hidden move, every betrayal, every silent accomplice. I called an old friend who had worked in the legal department for years. I need everything you know about the family holdings, the hidden shares, and any unusual transfers. I said, my voice low but urgent. He hesitated. It's risky, you know that. I leaned back, eyes on the city skyline. I've lived with risk my whole life. This is my turn. The conversation left me more determined. Piece by piece, I assembled the puzzle: falsified board minutes, backdated contracts, emails deleted and reconstructed. Each revelation was a dagger twisting in my chest, but also fuel for the fire I felt. My family's greed had underestimated me, and now it would be their undoing. I thought of my grandfather again, his advice echoing, "Protect what is yours, but move wisely. The world won't wait." His words grounded me. The betrayal was deep, but so was my resolve. I wasn't just reclaiming shares. I was reclaiming my legacy, my right to stand at the helm of the company he had built. Late into the night, I discovered a single folder marked "Contingency Owner." My heart raced. Inside were documents proving that, unbeknownst to anyone, I had full authority to reclaim control immediately. The CEO had signed papers that inadvertently strengthened my claim. Never realizing the trap she had walked into, I sank into the chair, breath shallow, heart pounding. Every family secret unveiled, every hidden ledger studied, it all led to this moment. I had underestimated nothing. I had prepared for betrayal, humiliation, and cunning. The weight of it pressed on me, but it was liberating. I realized the game was no longer just survival. It was strategy, patience, and timing. And I would be the one setting the rules now. As dawn broke, pale light spilling over the city, I looked at the folder one last time. I knew the next steps would require caution, deception, and precision. One wrong move and everything could collapse, but if I played it right. The CEO didn't know what was coming. And soon she would learn that every move she had made today, every arrogance-filled word, had unknowingly advanced my plan. Cliffhanger. A single document proves the CEO has unknowingly signed papers giving me back full control. Trust is a weapon, and I had to wield it carefully. I moved quietly through the office the next morning, observing my colleagues without raising suspicion. Every glance, every hesitant smile, every whispered conversation was a clue. I had spent years underestimating people, assuming loyalty was a given. Now I realized some allies were hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. I approached Lila, a longtime executive who had quietly supported me for years. Her eyes widened slightly as I leaned in. "I need your honesty," I said. Voice low, no filters, no fears. She glanced around nervously, then whispered, "I've always suspected she wasn't right for this role. I've seen her manipulate others, twist facts, undermine decisions." A slow smile spread across my face. This was the first confirmation, someone who had witnessed her arrogance firsthand. "Good," I said softly. "We'll need to work together, quietly, step by step." Next, I approached Jamal, a senior manager who had always seemed indifferent. I asked him casually about recent decisions, probing without alarming him. His hesitation told me more than words ever could. Finally, he muttered, "She's blind to what's really going on, but be careful. She notices patterns fast." I nodded, absorbing every detail. These small revelations were the building blocks of a larger plan. Allies didn't need to know everything, just enough to support subtle shifts without exposing themselves or me alone later. I reflected on how many years I had ignored these connections. Loyalty had always been buried beneath fear, ambition, and apathy. Now it was my advantage. I could orchestrate a quiet rebellion, a series of invisible moves that would destabilize the CEO without alerting her. I thought about my family, the betrayals that had shaped me, the hidden shares, and the secret ownership. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who had once tried to manipulate my life could now be used, in a sense, to restore balance. But the risk was high. One misstep, one loose word, and my plan could collapse like a house of cards. That afternoon, I held an informal meeting with a few trusted employees under the guise of a routine project discussion. I listened more than I spoke, subtly directing conversations, planting questions, and gauging reactions. Every nod, every hesitant comment, confirmed suspicions I had long nurtured. "We have to be careful," Lila murmured under her breath as we stepped into the hallway. "One wrong move, and she'd see through us." I nodded, the tension palpable. "Exactly. We move slowly, and she never knows who is really steering things behind the scenes." The office, bustling with oblivious employees, felt like a chessboard. Every action, every misstep by the CEO was another piece to capture. The thrill of control mixed with lingering caution. I couldn't afford overconfidence. This was a game of patience. Later, I retreated to my private office. Rain tapped lightly against the window, casting streaks over the city lights. Shadows moved across the walls as if echoing my thoughts. The quiet hum of the building contrasted with the storm of strategy forming inside me. I reviewed my mental map of the office. The allies, the blind spots, the CEO's predictable arrogance. Everything aligned for the first time. But I knew one thing: she was clever. She could sense the invisible currents beneath her feet. I had to remain patient, silent, invisible, and yet, even in the calmest waters, a ripple can betray secrets. Cliffhanger, one friend warns. Be careful. She's cleverer than you think. The first step is always the hardest and the most dangerous. I had spent weeks observing, planning, gathering fragments of loyalty. Now it was time. Every word I had overheard, every subtle hint from my allies, all led to this moment. I moved through the office quietly, my footsteps measured, my expression carefully neutral. I started planting small clues, tiny errors that only someone paying attention would notice. Reports subtly contradicted her directives. Meetings were scheduled. At times that exposed inconsistencies. Employees began to murmur in hushed tones, confusion spreading like wildfire. Though none suspected my involvement, during a casual conversation with a colleague, I dropped a hint about a misfiled contract. Did anyone double-check the Peterson account? I asked, letting the question linger. Her eyes flickered with unease, my first subtle ripple. Later, I observed the CEO's reaction. She stormed into a meeting, confident as ever, expecting obedience. But the hesitation in her staff was visible, tiny cracks forming in the wall of authority she had built. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a thrill that mingled with caution. I couldn't reveal myself not yet. In the break room, Jamal approached me, whispering, "You're shaking things up." I think she noticed something is off. I nodded, a calm mask covering the fire inside. Good, let her think it's all chance. Even my allies, carefully briefed, were playing their roles perfectly. Layla was precise, subtle, almost invisible in her support, planting her own observations. The employees who had doubted her now had quiet courage. Nudged by invisible hands guiding them toward clarity, I reflected on how power worked, how arrogance made people blind to the truth. She believed she was in full control, unaware that every confident decision she made was being quietly undone. The thrill was intoxicating, but I reminded myself patience was paramount. One wrong move, one slip, and everything could unravel. That afternoon, I watched a major presentation unfold. She led it with her usual flair, unaware of the contradictions woven subtly into the reports. The staff's whispered questions, the hesitation in their eyes, it was all visible, and I noted each reaction meticulously. The first seeds of doubt had been planted. I stepped out to the balcony. The city stretched before me, lights shimmering like tiny sparks of possibility. The wind carried a chill that matched the tension inside me. I thought about my grandfather, about the family secrets that had shaped this company. Each betrayal, each manipulation had taught me to wait, to plan, to strike at the right moment. The first move is always silent, I murmured to myself, inhaling deeply. The thrill of invisible influence coursed through me. This was a game of patience, of subtlety, of power wielded without exposure. Later, the CEO summoned an emergency meeting. I sensed the shift immediately, her arrogance faltering, her confidence shaken. Staff whispered in confusion, questions unspoken but felt. I remained calm, pretending to review my notes, watching her lose control incrementally. Her eyes scanned the room, suspicion flashing briefly. I held her gaze for a moment, letting the tension build. Before looking away, calm, harmless, invisible, I realized then how fragile her authority truly was. One misstep, one carefully planted inconsistency, and she would stumble. And yet she was clever, resilient, dangerous if provoked. Every move had to be calculated, precise. The first domino had fallen, and now I had her attention, Cliffhanger. The CEO calls an emergency meeting. Something has clearly gone wrong. She thought she was untouchable. The conference room was packed board members, senior staff, and a few nervous employees. The CEO strutted in, exuding confidence, expecting obedience and admiration. I sat quietly near the back, observing, blending. And every eye was on her, yet every subtle hesitation, every flicker of doubt, told a story she couldn't see. Her presentation began smoothly, polished, and rehearsed. But the reports I had subtly adjusted began to surface contradictions. Numbers that didn't add up, claims that clashed with documented facts. I watched her face as the first question came, sharp and unexpected. Her smile faltered ever so slightly. Can you clarify why these numbers differ from last quarter's report? One board member asked. She hesitated, swallowing hard. It's a revised projection. Her voice wavered, a crack in her armor. I felt a pulse of satisfaction mingled with caution. The public nature of this confrontation meant stakes were higher. One misstep, and she could recover her composure. But with each question, each small inconsistency, her confidence eroded further. I leaned back, letting my mind replay every betrayal that had brought me here. Family greed, hidden shares, manipulation, all invisible until now. I had been silent too long, but tonight the tables were turning. Every whispered doubt, every hesitant glance among staff, was a domino ready to fall. Her eyes swept the room, trying to regain control. These discrepancies are minor. We'll address them later, she said, her tone forced. But I could see the panic beneath the polished surface. The uncertainty creeping into her posture, her gestures. I felt a quiet thrill. The first wave of justice, invisible but undeniable, was taking shape. I had orchestrated it carefully small. Enough to be believable, yet damaging enough to shake her authority. Lila shot me a quick glance from across the room, subtle but affirming. Our plan was working. Jamal gave a barely perceptible nod, his confidence in our silent strategy evident. Every ally was a silent piece on a growing chessboard, and tonight, she was learning that appearances could deceive. Her voice rose, attempting dominance, but the tension was tangible. I've handled bigger challenges than this, she said. Though her eyes betrayed the truth, the room's subtle reactions, small shifts in posture, whispered doubt, made her claim hollow. I reflected on the irony, how someone so brazen could crumble under carefully planted truths. How power, when misused, became fragile. I thought of my grandfather's warnings. Authority without respect is a castle built on sand. She had underestimated the strength of patience, of observation, of quiet strategy. The room grew colder, the hum of conversation fading as the board members exchanged looks. I noticed her trembling hands as she shuffled papers, attempting to regain her poise. Every calculated move I had made, the misplaced contract, the contradictory report was now unraveling her control. The CEO's face went pale, her carefully rehearsed dominance faltered as more questions were raised, more inconsistencies highlighted. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, vulnerable. Exposed in front of everyone who had once followed her unquestioningly, I sat back, watching her unravel silently, satisfaction tempered by the knowledge that patience was still crucial. This was only the beginning. I hadn't revealed myself yet. I couldn't too early, and the advantage would be lost. And then, as she stumbled over another question, murmurs spreading through the room, I realized she had no idea who was orchestrating. This from the shadows, cliffhanger, she falters publicly, her authority cracking, but she still doesn't suspect I'm the real owner behind it all. Victory tastes bittersweet. The office was quiet that morning, almost eerily so. Employees moved with caution, whispers hanging in the air like smoke. I walked through the halls, folder in hand, eyes sharp, aware of every glance, every gesture. The CEO had been subdued since the revelation, but her presence still carried tension. She was a predator contained, not defeated. I gathered my closest allies, Leela, Jamal, and a few others who had silently supported me, and outlined the final steps. We moved strategically. Public confidence must be restored, but our control must be unmistakable, I said, voice calm, firm. The room nodded, their eyes reflecting trust and loyalty. This wasn't just about taking back what was mine, it was about protecting the company from arrogance, From manipulation, from people who underestimated the cost of betrayal. Later, the CEO called for a staff-wide meeting. I entered the room. Last, letting her take the stage first. She tried to regain authority, offering rehearsed reassurances and carefully chosen words, but the room was subtly against her. The small inconsistencies I had planted, the whispers of doubt, and the quiet alignment of allies made every word she spoke hollow. "We have transparency now," I said, stepping forward. Silence fell, all eyes turned toward me. "And with transparency comes accountability. Today, we ensure the company moves forward under rightful leadership stability, respect, and competence." The CEO froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. She realized the final move had been made, a checkmate she hadn't anticipated. Every misstep, every subtle undermining, every quiet strategy she had ignored came to fruition in this single moment. You can't just," she began, but I raised a hand. "I can," I said firmly, the weight of years of betrayal, humiliation, and patient planning in my voice. "Because the truth isn't negotiable. This company is mine. It always has been." The staff murmured in approval, hesitant but relieved. They had waited for someone to lead with clarity, and now the path was unmistakable. The CEO's presence had been reduced to a shadow of authority, a cautionary figure in a story of overconfidence and misjudgment. I reflected on the journey, the humiliation on my first day, the secret ownership, the family betrayals, the careful orchestration of lies, and the slow dismantling of her false dominance. Every step had led to this checkmate, every risk had been calculated. And now, control was firmly in my hands. The CEO's shoulders slumped slightly, and I caught a flicker of grudging respect or perhaps resignation in her eyes. She knew she had underestimated me. She had ignored the quiet power that had always existed behind the surface. I let her stand there for a moment, the silence speaking volumes. No words could undo the damage of arrogance, and no charm could regain the control she had lost. My heart swelled with a mixture of triumph and empathy, a recognition that even the most cunning could fall, and the most patient could rise. Later, as I sat in my office, looking out over the city, the folder of legal documents resting on the desk, I felt a strange sense of closure. The company was mine, but the battle had reminded me that power must be tempered with caution. Arrogance is seductive, betrayal is inevitable, and patience is the ultimate weapon. I thought of my grandfather again, his voice echoing in my mind. "Protect what is yours, but move wisely. Never underestimate the quiet ones." I smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and reflection. The CEO had been defeated, but the lessons lingered. Control was not just about ownership, it was about strategy, observation, and knowing when to strike. And now, as the sun set over the skyline, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The game was over, but the scars, the memories, and the lessons would remain forever. Closure. I reclaimed my company, exposed arrogance, and restored justice, but the journey left a quiet ache, a reminder that power is never without cost. I thought victory would feel like relief, but as I sat alone in my office that evening, the city lights flickering outside the window, I realized it was more complicated. Triumph tasted sweet, yes, but bitter threads lingered in my chest. The company was mine, my control undeniable, yet the cost was heavier than I expected. I ran my fingers over the folder of legal documents on my desk. Years of secrecy, patience, strategy, it all culminated here. Yet, even as I had orchestrated her downfall and reclaimed what was rightfully mine, a part of me mourned the tension, the loss of trust, the fractured relationships. Family betrayal had carved deep scars, and no amount of victory could erase them. Lila knocked softly on the door and stepped inside. "You did it," she said, voice quiet but proud. I smiled faintly, a mix of gratitude and lingering sorrow. "Yes, but it doesn't feel like it should be this quiet." She nodded, understanding without words. Sometimes the victories that matter most are silent, and sometimes the cost makes them heavy. I thought of the CEO, humiliated, defeated, yet still human. There was a strange pang of empathy, a recognition that ambition can blind, that arrogance can unravel, and that even the most calculated power can crumble. But I had learned what I needed: patience, observation, and the strength to reclaim what was mine. The office was quiet now, the hum of computers and faint chatter reduced to a gentle background. I reflected on my journey: the first day humiliation, the anonymous message, the secret lawyer, the alliances in disguise, the careful dismantling of false authority, the public exposure, and finally, the checkmate. Every chapter had left its mark, shaping me into someone who understood power, patience, and consequence in ways I never had before. I leaned back, gazing out at the city skyline. Neon lights shimmered over the river, cars honking faintly, people moving on with lives unaware of the quiet storm that had passed in this building. I felt a strange sense of peace, tempered by the lingering ache of what had been lost along the way. Power has a price, I whispered to myself. And sometimes the cost is quieter than the victory itself. Layla stayed a moment longer. Rest. Tonight, tomorrow, the company will need you, but so will you. Don't forget that, I nodded, realizing she was right. Leadership wasn't just about control, it was about balance, responsibility, and understanding the human elements that often went unseen. I had won the company, but the lessons of betrayal, trust, and patience would stay with me forever. Before leaving, I walked past the CEO's office. Her chair was empty, the blinds half closed. I paused, imagining her reflection in the glass. She had been defeated, yes, but she had also been a teacher in her own way, a harsh, unforgiving mirror of arrogance, teaching me resilience, strategy, and the power of quiet observation. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a mix of freedom and solemnity. The city stretched endlessly before me, bright and alive, a reminder that life moves forward. Indifferent to victories or losses, I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message to Layla. We did it, but we'll move carefully. Always. And, as I looked back at the towering building, its windows reflecting the last light of day, I realized closure wasn't about celebration. It was about understanding, reflection, and the quiet acknowledgement that even triumph carries shadows. The company was mine, the battle was over, but the story, the lessons, and the scars would linger forever.